might say.
Yeah.
Tell the folks about you. I know very little about your background. I know it enough, but I want to hear your background, your backstory.
Okay, well, my first book, Masquerade, outlines my life story. Just to summarize it for you, I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse and physical abuse at the hands of my dad, and multiple men that he had sold me to across the years from the time I was 5 until I married my wife at 17. And by the way, last month was our 43rd wedding anniversary.
Congratulations!
So, yeah.
You married after 43.
Man, keep the lights right where they are. Don't change it from there.
Yeah, 3 years. Congratulations.
That wrinkle cream is staying in place. Yeah. No, so Masquerade, my original book, outlines actually my whole life. That it starts from the time I was 5 when my dad first raped me in his workshop behind our home. And that went on very intensely from 5 to 10 years old. And then, of course, part of my story also is that because of that, I, ended up at around 12, 13 years old, the age of puberty, waking up and kind of realizing that searching for the love of a father. I had one foot in a homosexual world, one in the heterosexual world. I got there, didn't know how to get out. I had taught myself to play keys as a young kid, piano, and would at the early age would play for a lot of the old Southern gospel singings. Oftentimes would play for the Goodman family when they were in town or something along that line, and so grew up doing that kind of thing, and all of that was, all of those early years were just more of a little kid behind multiple masks. I was unacceptable. I knew I was unacceptable. My father reminded me of that every day. I remember, I think I told them the last time I was on a program, and I'll go on past this, but just to give the viewing audience an idea of the intensity that I was living under. When I was about 10 years old, my dad took me one afternoon out to a field. It was a Friday afternoon. This had happened before, but there was an old farmer standing in front of a pickup truck, and my dad dropped me off to him for the weekend for whatever that old man wanted to do with the firstborn son of who was supposed to be the finest man in the county where I was raised. My dad was revered, he was loved, he was hardworking, he was humble, he was generous. He was also a monster behind closed doors for me. And I remember that afternoon, the old man reached over into the bed of his truck and he pulled out a basket of tomatoes. And he had a $5 bill in his hand, and he was handing them to my dad as payment.
They paid for you with a basket of tomatoes and $5.
Well, my dad, just to show you the kind of worthlessness I'm trying to describe that I had already taken upon myself, my dad held up his hand when he offered him the $5 bill and said, "You keep that, that's way too much." And I remember thinking, sorry if I'm...
sorry, brother.
But I remember thinking that afternoon, I'm not even worth the $5 on top of the basket of tomatoes. And so that's my history. That's where I came from. So
well, let me ask you, did you have other brothers and sisters?
I had one brother, one sister.
Was this going on with them, or was it just you?
My brother and sister would have to speak for themselves. Oh my, I thought I had that turned off. No. These people have to wait. We're supposed to be on vibrate.
It's all right, brother. Don't worry about it.
They tell everybody the studio
watching you on TV. They won't let you know. We're watching you on TV. You're looking good. You don't look 43.
I'm 61. No, but anyway, where were we?
About your family, your brothers and sisters.
Yeah, my brother and sister would have to speak for themselves. They're... by and large, I think if those who are listening who have been abused, who have possibly found the courage to tell their story after they're, an adult, they'll identify what I'm about to say. Most people find it very hard to speak about such things ever. And if they do, believing that other siblings or their family is going to be supportive. And I can say this with great confidence because my story's been around the world, and I get emails every day from people all around the world, and I hear this repeated many times over, is that my family doesn't want anything to do with me, or they're very angry that I have shared the story, because there's something inside of most people that wants to protect the legacy of the family or the family name. And there was a lot of that with my family. I have a great relationship with my brother and my sister, but on that subject, I suppose we agree to disagree because my dad's treated them different, I can tell you that. It was different than he treated me. For whatever reason, I'll never be able to explain it to you, and I was his oldest, his firstborn. He never liked me. And I've had people ask me why. I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, what was your mother during all this?
She was there.
Did you ever tell her what was going on, or did you think this is just how it's supposed to be?
My mother knew some. There's a lot she did not know. Again, keep in mind that when I was 5 years old, I was born in 1954. So when I was 5 years old, when my dad first began to abuse me, that was in 1959 in rural Alabama, in the cotton fields. You'd have to drive for miles to get to the next farmhouse from where we live. I'm not justifying this. I'm just telling you that this was a different time, and it was a different time frame. And my mother had never worked. She was a housewife. And I can also tell you that I loved my mom. I never faulted her for that. I often explain it this way. If this was what was happening to the firstborn son of the finest man who's ever lived, imagine what it was like to be his wife. And I was too busy trying to stay a couple of steps ahead of a predator. My every waking minute, every day of my childhood was thinking about surviving. And what time I wasn't doing that, I was off in a vivid imagination, because that was a place where I could at least feel safe. I don't have to deal with reality. I can pretend to be Superman or something, which was my favorite comic book character.
Well, what gave you the courage to speak out against this?
To tell my story?
Yeah. And how old were you then?
When I first shared my testimony publicly was in the late 90s.
Wow. So you kept this.
I was traveling with a good friend of mine, Lulu Roman, who was on Hee-Haw for many years. And Lou's story is very similar to mine in ways. And so she and I traveled together and began to share our story and our music, both of us being musicians. And that was the first time I ever began to speak publicly. And I did it because the Lord just kind of stopped me in my tracks one day and said, Danny, I'm going to open a door for this, and I want you to share your story, which I was, panic over that because I could just see friendships and relationships evaporating. And they did. Many did. There are many people today that it causes.
Why? Why
Well,
friendships?
imagine. I'll give you an example, and you'll be able to wrap your head around it real quick. Think of somebody right now that you love. Maybe a college friend or a high school friend or somebody in ministry right now that you're really close to. Just think of that guy that's your fishing buddy. He's your best buddy. And imagine that. Let's change places. Imagine he has a child that's either high school age or whatever, and this child shares a similar story to what I'm sharing about that guy. There is something psychologically inside of you that needs to reject that quickly. You can't wrap your head around it because the first thoughts that will come to your mind is, I know this guy, but you don't. Even that guy you just imagined, you don't know him, and he doesn't know you. He knows who you present to him, and you know who he presents to you. So if this child were to come out with that story, there's just something psychologically within us that needs to shut that down or needs to find another explanation. I hear it all the time. There's got to be something wrong with this story. There's got to be something else. And so I'm a strong person, obviously, because this is a worldwide ministry that is basically built off of that, where I came from.
Right.
It goes in many directions, but it comes from that platform and healing from that platform. And it can be tough for me on days because everybody needs to be accepted. But imagine those people out there who are still struggling with this, and they find the courage to share, and all of a sudden they're met with that type of rejection. That's very tough.
Yeah.
It's very tough. And in all honesty, I'm not going to point the finger at the church because I adore the church, and the family of God's a precious thing. But the church, unfortunately, is one of the last places that you could be transparent about such things.
And it's a shame.
It really is a shame, but hey, we're growing and we're learning. So maybe somebody who has a ministry out there is listening to us tonight, and they decide that, you know, I hear God speaking to me, and I want to be more open. I want to be more of a help in that area. Because trust me, sitting on the pew beside you every Sunday in your family, I know you in this studio right now. There are people sitting here right now that I'll guarantee you, they may not have my exact story, but they're already, their wheels are spinning. There are things that they have masked. There are hurts that they've never been able to talk about for the very reasons that I've outlined.
Well, the thing is, in my opinion, you can take it or leave it, but a pastor or a member of a church, I mean, we should be like Christ. We should be able to take anything to that person, and they love us, and they talk to us, and we'll be able to be open about it, and be honest about it, and not feel judged like that, or you know, unaccepted like that, because Christ accepted us just who we are.
Absolutely.
You know, he accepted us before we were born, before we had been through what we've been through, and in your situation, you couldn't even help that, and people just turn against you. That just blows my mind, I guess, but people need to love other people, no matter what they've been through.
Absolutely.
And forgive and accept them. And I want to talk about forgiveness here in a second. We'll come back to a song.
Okay.
Let's take a break for a song.
Sure.
If you're watching tonight and you've been through a similar situation, and maybe you have a question, call in and we'll try to get that question answered for you. 244-1616. Let's go back to Alan right now as he sings another wonderful song, Ready to Serve.